Okay, welcome back everyone. The purpose of this particular session is to explain to you a little bit more about the sample statement and samples and the role of the sample statement in Eviews. In front of you, you should have your work file. By now it could look quite different from the one that you're seeing. I just recreated it to clean up the clutter. Now basically from the time that when we actually created the work file, you should have always been noticing these two key lines here. The first one says the range, basically, which is the range of the work file, which is 1970 to 2020. Just to remind you, the range represents the maximum length of any time series, or the maximum period over which any time series data can apply, can exist. The sample, which is the second line here, just to point that out, actually represents the active working range for Eviews statistics. For example, if you're doing descriptive statistics, the sample statement dictates basically the range over which the statistics will be calculated. So the premise, of course, is that we don't always want to work on all of our data. We might want to work on a subset of it. So in some sense, a sample is a subset of the existing data, at least row-wise, in the work file. Okay, so you have to, an important object in Eviews, or an important skill in Eviews, is being able to manipulate the sample and to use the appropriate commands for doing so. Now again, the way I normally, my favorite way of doing the sample statement is simply to type in the sample statement in the command line and to set the period over which I'm interested in working. So in this case, let's assume it's just 1990 to 2013, which is, sorry, I just ended up 2013. And you'll notice now that what's happened actually is that the range has remained the same, okay, 1970 to 2020, but the sample has basically been reduced to 1990 to 2013. Okay, so now if I, so that, as you can see, basically the sample statement is essentially reducing the active range over which we're going to calculate statistics. Now, to show you what that means, if I now view, for example, any of the series, so I'm going to go back to real GDP here, and just show you the entire view, and I'm going to maximize the screen. Notice that we basically have all of the data shown here from 1970 to 2013. Now, if I were to hit or to toggle the sample statement here, basically what Eviews is doing is in toggling between the maximum sample and the active sample, which is 1990 to 2013. If I were to change now the sample here to 1995, and press enter, immediately what Eviews does is reduce the number of observations shown to that appropriate sample. So you should pick up that the role of the sample statement is to restrict the area or the observations over which you're going to perform your operations, so whether it be a graph or a regression or a basic statistical exercise. So in this case, if I just view descriptive statistics, stats table, now I'm only basically focusing on the existing statistics or the valid statistics over that range of which there's only 19. Now hopefully, well, if I change this to 1990, then basically what happened is that immediately it adjusted the operation so that it calculated the means and the medians and the maximums, etc., over the new sample range. Okay, so as you can see, the sample statement is very, very important and needs to be mastered. Now, couple of shortcuts. Sample all reverts the sample back to the maximum range. If you want to change the sample, you can also click on, literally on the sample statement. I just click basically on this word here, sample, and up came my sample statement. I can actually now put here, let me just get rid of, literally I can write in here what I want the sample to be, and it could be 1970 to 1990. And we can actually even allow for pairs to remove observations in the middle of the sample that we don't care about. And so that we can press enter, and now we actually have a disjoint sample over which, if we view the data, open, select, one window. Now, if I view the spreadsheet, you'll see that it's omitted the data from 1991 to 2000. And now any analysis that I do will ignore those data sets. So if I now do stats table, we have 35 observations as to be expected, but it ends up, I mean, it's allowing for a fairly complicated sample. Now, once again, I can go back and just revert it back to the existing sample, or if I don't remember the beginning or the end, I can simply say sample at first, at last. That's the same thing as sample all. And notice also that I can actually do a little bit of algebra if I want to. If I don't remember the first date, but I know I want to go 5 periods ahead, and I want to ignore the last 5 observations. Excuse me. I can actually, or last 10 observations, I should say, just to give some difference here. It will actually it'll work out that what you mean is 1975 to 2010. So these are, in other words, you can do algebra basically in sample statements. And finally, if you want to make it, you can even do sample if statements, and I'll just demonstrate that. The easiest way to do this is if you say sample, for example, all, if d log, so now I'm going to put in an expression basically, our GDP of Australia is greater than 0. So the way to think about this is that I'm going to pick up all the years in which the growth rate in GDP was positive and analyze that data for using various statistics. So now it's picked up that there are 41 observations in the data set that satisfy this criterion. So that's what we call a sample if statement. You can even make it a little bit more, you can sample if, for example, let me bring that back up, and go back and edit it, and you might want to look at and d log GDP of Fiji is greater than 0. So in short, we can have rather complicated, and now also again it seems to be, oops, I should have had, I forgot, I left out the d log there. I left out the d log there, and I'll adjust it, and if I do that, insert. Now there's only 31 observations in which basically both the real growth rate of GDP in Australia and Fiji was simultaneously positive. Okay, so let me just open the selected in one. Now if I basically go back and just view any object as a group, then now what it's doing is showing you all the years in which basically we had positive growth in both of those countries. And notice that in 2009, around the Great Recession, growth was negative, and so it's not really incorporating that observation. And then you can just simply view descriptive statistics, say common sample, and off we go, we get our basic stats, or we could have just said view descriptive individual sample, and obviously it's got valid data over the 2 periods. Okay, so that's the sample statement. The basic purpose is to control the data over which you operate, you do your statistics, whether it be basic summary statistics or regressions. It's probably the most important, or one of the most important objects available in Eviews, and certainly something that you need to master in order to become an effective user of Eviews. And we will use it quite extensively throughout this course. So I encourage you to master the sample statement. Thank you.